Almost a quarter of HDFC Limited's shareholders voted against a resolution seeking the continuation of Deepak Parekh as a director on the board of HDFC Limited. This came through after a shareholder meeting on Monday, where 22% voted against Parekh's reappointment. Joining us on the phone line to talk about this surprising development is Amit Tandon, founder and managing director at proxy advisory firm IiAS. Good afternoon, Mr. Tandon. Thanks for joining us, and sorry to have kept you waiting. Straight off, first question, what did you make of this? This was surprising to all of us.
As you say, it is indeed very surprising because it's not that directors haven't got voted against, and for the most it happens when there is some kind of battle between parts of the family. But otherwise, I think this is something which has kind of taken us by a little bit of surprise. So again, having said so, you did see something happen in Tata Motors, but it's not quite the same thing. Mr. Deepak Parekh is respected. We've recently seen the fact that, not one, but two issues garnered overwhelming support. HDFC, the AMC, as well as HDFC Bank, the QIP plus ADR, and those are large sums of money supported by large institutional players. It's not that, you had retail investors on one side and the institutional investors on the other side. So this quantum of vote would have come in from institutional investors.
I just want to point to the resolution. The resolution really talks about the reappointment of Deepak Parekh as the non-executive director of the corporation on attaining age 75 on October 18, 2019, which means this is about the future. Does this? Yes, the board. Majority have voted in favor. Does the fact that 1/4 have voted against his continuation have any bearing on his continuation right now?
Look, I don't think so, and I don't think it should have any bearing on his continuation in future, because if you look at the investors, and particularly the investors in America, they are not going to vote on anyone on the basis of age. Therefore, they don't say that, look, you've achieved the age of 75 and therefore you should be stepping down. And then when we look at data for other directors, we've seen a lot of this happen, particularly this year after SEBI amended its regulations. But we are not seeing this pattern of behavior there on account of age. People saying that, look, we don't want a particular director to continue because he's kind of crossed a certain age limit. So it's, again, as you and both Ira have said right at the beginning, it is a fairly surprising development. But the market has the tendency to shock us from time to time. The question is to understand what happened here.
Mr. Tandon, from your proprietary data, what is, general sort of median or average of voting against directors? Can you give us, how this compares to what the average would be?
Yeah, so actually the number to focus on, let's not focus on where promoters are there, because it kind of tends to skew the data. But what we find is that the median for votes for, or let me put it the other way around, let's kind of flip the data and say the median against. While the number's been going up, it was about 8% against in 2016, and this year it's about 13% in the first 6 months. It's still nowhere close to the 24% number, which we've just seen in the case of with Mr. Deepak Parekh. And the other thing, of course, is that for reappointments, the data is, again, this year we have seen some large amounts of people voting against. But when you kind of then break up the data and look at what had happened, it's much more family quarrels, which is kind of leading to some things rather than anything else. But no, we are not. It's not consistent with the data we are seeing in other cases.
Mr. Tandon, again, to the point that you made right at the start, there are no contentious issues that at least we know of on the table. Is there a way to understand whether this is foreign investors? Is this linked? It's probably not linked to age, you're saying, but it has to be linked to something.
It's, if you kind of break up, we were looking at the shareholding of HDFC. Clearly, it is institutionally owned. It's owned a lot more by the global investors than the domestic investors. But if you kind of leave aside LIC, which owns 3.8%, you'll have about 20 investors who would be owning about 25% of the stock. So it's not just one, but it's many. And therefore, it's a kind of question of all of them getting together, taking the same view, voting against. That's what we need to understand. The advantage we have is the domestic investors, of course, report why they voted at the end of each quarter, and we will be able to look at this data, which we do capture in our proprietary database. But global investors reported once a year, particularly the American ones. That happens typically around June or July. So we'll get to know how they voted only a year from now, by which time this could well be forgotten. But no, it's something to keep an eye out on to understand what has happened. Again, I keep saying that the HDFC AMC was on a roadshow at this time. HDFC Bank was on a roadshow. If there were some concerns, I'm sure they would have popped up during these investor meets when they were selling shares in these entities, and something would have kind of been mentioned. It might have been discussed. So therefore, and as we are here in the market where everything leaks, so we would have got a sense of what would happen. So in a sense, it's a bit surprising that none of it came out till the vote was actually cast.
Good talking to you, Amit. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.